about you, but when you look at old movies, there's a sense of magical about them, isn't there? It's a different time when stars were real superstars. I was lucky enough recently to go through some old footage that I'm trying to digitize with certain interviews with people that I've been lucky enough to meet. One of them was the superstar Tony Curtis. Now, Tony and I became friends over many years. Wonderful guy, lots of wonderful stories about the golden age of Hollywood. And I'd forgotten until I found this particular gem in that particular interview that he'd starred with the beautiful Gina Lollobrigida. Remember her? She was, of course, always seen as the secondary one to the equally beautiful Sophia Loren. Never know why, I thought they were both individually beautiful looking ladies. And I don't know if you remember, but way back in 1956, she made her big European debut in a movie that I really never tire of, Trapeze. Remember it? Burt Lancaster, Tony Curtis, Gina Lollobrigida. I don't know about you, but all of those effects that they did with the high wire literally had me on the edge of my seat. I can't do with heights or anything like that. So anything like that, I was sort of desperate to ask Tony how nervous he was. And he said, look, it didn't really affect him. He was already quite a good acrobat, as was, of course, Burt Lancaster. But what I didn't realize was that this particular movie had something of a royal connection. And also, it could have been set totally differently. That's right. First in London, and more surprisingly, in Blackpool, in Lancashire. As ever, let me explain. Hi, good morning, Neil Sean here. Nice to see you today. That's right, Blackpool in Lancashire, because when the film producer, Carol Reed, was scouting around, he was a British film producer who'd enjoyed phenomenal success, and basically he thought, well, look, if there's one place that circus is thriving, it's none other than the famous Blackpool Tower Circus. And he felt, being British, that this would be a great thing to actually base the film in there. Sadly for him, though, this was at the very height of a summer season. Blackpool in the 1950s was incredibly busy, and they couldn't spare the time or indeed afford the opportunity to shut the circus off for such a long period for filming. Hence the reason it went over to Paris. But as Tony told me, because he'd been all around the United Kingdom by this point and knew it well, he really liked Blackpool and liked the idea of the fact that the circus would be beneath the beautiful and brilliant Blackpool Tower. But what's more important is Carol Reed, as I said, was a celebrated film producer who had something of a royal connection. Let me explain. Carol Reed, you see, had made many, many hit movies, including Odd Man Out in 1947, The Third Man in 1949, and possibly his best-known movie from 1968, Oliver. However, in 1948, he married the actress Penelope Dudley Ward, also known as Pemple, the elder daughter of Freda Dudley Ward, who had been a mistress of Edward, Prince of Wales. Later, of course, King Edward, and then Duke of Windsor. As Tony told me, he absolutely adored Freda coming onto the set because she talked a lot about the British monarchy and what was expected and, really what life was like in that particular era. She'd, of course, been lucky enough also to have met and spent time with Wallis Simpson. It's strange, isn't it, to think when you look at these people that you've been lucky enough to meet and the connections they had. But as ever, back to Trapeze. Was it a success? Well, a lot of the people associated with the film, didn't get particularly a great start. I mean, critics weren't particularly kind about it, but as ever, it's the box office that counts. And as Tony told me, in the very first year, it took over 15 million at the box office. That is, of course, with circulation, television rights, and that sort of thing. So he said it doesn't really necessarily matter whether the critics like it. It's all about whether the public like it in the end. But isn't it amazing to think that this brilliant film that still sort of survives the test of time today, Trapeze, starring Burt Lancaster, Gina and Tony Curtis, really is still something of a phenomenon, even today. As I often say here on the show, if you haven't seen it, there are elements of it. I think there's a full version on it for free also on YouTube. A real spectacular watch, particularly if you're sort of hunkering down with a Horlicks and a few bickies. You know what I'm saying. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.